Welcome to the 2026 CIP Recertification by Continuing Education Info Session. Thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. This presentation is designed for those who are eligible to recertify by continuing education for the first time or those who need to recertify by continuing education and just need a refresher. My name is Jennifer Jost. I am the Certification Coordinator with Primer. As you are going through the recertification by continuing education process, you will mainly be corresponding with me. This presentation will start with an overview of the recertification by continuing education process that will include where to find information on the Primer website, what to submit, and some tips for a smoother experience. Because this is not a live presentation, we will not have a Q&A session, but I will provide the links to our CIP recertification webpage, as well as our email address at the end of the presentation, so you can review the webpage and email us with any questions that come up while you are watching the presentation. Many questions can be answered by reviewing the About CIP recertification webpage. Detailed information regarding deadlines and fees, recertification options, acceptable continuing education credits, and guidelines at a glance can be found on this page. As soon as you become CIP certified, you can start to gather continuing education credits. Review our CIP recertification webpage to find out more information regarding the recertification process and whether you qualify to recertify by continuing education. To be eligible for recertification by continuing education, you must continuously maintain certification without a lapse greater than 6 months. If the lapse in certification is greater than 6 months, credential holders must take and pass the examination again to reinstate the credential. CIP credential holders must recertify every 3 years and may recertify by continuing education twice in a 9-year period before being required to recertify by examination. Once an individual maintains their certification for over 10 consecutive years, they may recertify solely through continuing education and do not need to sit for the examination. The first step and ongoing throughout the certification period will be to attend learning opportunities to earn eligible recertification credits. The next steps will be to maintain an ongoing record of CIP credits earned. This will be covered in the Continuing Education Excel Tracker portion of the presentation. The next step will be to obtain documentation for each activity attended. This will be covered in the documentation portion of the presentation. Finally, you will want to keep track of your recertification materials. This will be very important when it comes time to submit your recertification materials. Start by reviewing acceptable continuing education activities. For CIPs, all programs must be beyond the basic fundamental level of knowledge and be on topics found within the CIP body of knowledge as it pertains to HRPP IRB administration and the application of federal regulations. Visit our CIP recertification webpage and read the Acceptable Continuing Education Activities section to find out more. As you look for and attend learning opportunities, keep in mind acceptable continuing education activities, eligibility requirements, and that credits must be earned between the current certification period, start and end dates. For the first 2 points, information can be found on the CIP recertification page on Primer's website. The dates for the last point can be found within your Primer profile by downloading your certification certificate. Later in this presentation, I will share a resource available that provides recertification by continuing education Primer programs available for CIP credit in one place. The resource includes topic areas, free programs for Primer members, upcoming paid content, and past paid primer content. Take a moment to think about when continuing education credits need to be earned. Would credits need to be earned anytime after originally earning certification, or only during the active certification period? Knowing and understanding when credits need to be earned will help you identify learning opportunities to apply towards recertification. Answer: only during active certification period. The date credits are earned must be between the active certification cycle start and end date. Any unused credits from a previous certification cycle cannot be carried over even if the credits were not previously claimed. The date the learning opportunity is viewed or attended must be within the active recertification period. Recorded learning opportunities with an original air date outside the active certification period can be included if they were viewed and logged within the active period. Don't assume because something was given credit in the past, it is still eligible. This point will be covered in the eligible credits section of the presentation. Please note, there is a 6-month grace period following the certification end or expire date to achieve recertification by. For example, if you are due to recertify in June 2026, you have until December of 2026 to achieve recertification. If you are due to recertify in December 2026, you have until June 2027 to achieve recertification. Now we know the date range eligible credits must be earned during. Let's go over how to find this information. Feel free to pause this presentation to follow along on your computer if you are able. Log into your primer profile. If you cannot remember your password, try a password reset. Let us know if you still cannot access your account by emailing certification@primer.org. Please do not create a new account as it will not have your certification information. Once logged into your primer profile, you will be in a section called My Profile. Click on Certificate Download on the top right side of the red banner. If you have a certificate available for download, this is where you will find it. If you have any questions regarding your certificate, please email them to certification@primer.org. Let's discuss CIP credit eligibility requirements. All eligibility requirements must be met for continuing education credits to count towards CIP recertification. Topics must be within the CIP body of knowledge content outline and be beyond the initial basic or fundamental level of knowledge and pertain to IRB HRPP administration as they relate to applying the federal regulations. Topics must be within the CIP body of knowledge content outline. Keep in mind the domain and section a learning opportunity fits into. This information will need to be recorded on the Continuing Education Excel tracker. The CIP Council makes the determination if a topic is within the body of knowledge. Topics must be beyond the initial basic or fundamental level of knowledge. Keep in mind at the time of recertification, you will have a minimum of 5 years experience in the field, 2 years to be eligible to take the certification exam, and 3 years certification cycle. By this time, you should have an advanced level of knowledge of how to interpret and apply federal regulations as they pertain to HRPP IRB administration. Keep in mind, topics must be found within the CIP body of knowledge content outline and be beyond a basic level of knowledge. Now, topics must also pertain to IRB HRPP administration as they relate to applying the federal regulations. Topics that are operational in nature or focus on institutional policies are not eligible. Don't assume because something was given credit in the past, it is still eligible. The CIP Council makes the determination if a topic fits within the eligibility requirements. Take a moment to think about CIP credit eligibility requirements. Would all three eligibility requirements need to be met, or only one or two requirements need to be met? Knowing and understanding credit eligibility requirements will help you identify learning opportunities to apply towards recertification during the active certification period. Answer: all three requirements must be met. Keep in mind at the time of recertification, you will have a minimum of 5 years' experience in the field. By this time, you should be familiar with the federal regulations and have an advanced level of knowledge to understand how to apply federal regulations. As a refresher, topics that are not within the body of knowledge content outline, are at a basic level of knowledge, or that do not pertain to IRB HRPP administration as they relate to applying federal regulations would not be eligible. Remember, it was mentioned earlier that learning opportunities are operational in nature or focus on institutional policies are not eligible. Take a moment to think about CIP credit eligibility requirements as they pertain to conferences. Recall that all three eligibility requirements need to be met for credits to count towards recertification. Would all conference sessions receive CIP credit? Knowing and understanding credit eligibility requirements will help you identify conference sessions attended that may apply towards recertification during the active certification period. Answer: no. Only eligible sessions would get credit. Keep in mind that all eligibility requirements must be met for a session to receive credit. Conferences submitted for CIP Council review prior to the event may indicate which sessions are eligible and number of credits available. We have discussed credit eligibility requirements when reviewing learning opportunities for possible continuing education credits. Primer has created a new resource for CIP credential holders to easily identify Primer programs eligible for continuing education credit. Check out this chart to see where popular continuing education topics fall within the content outline and to explore Primer programs eligible for continuing education credit. This image displays topic areas, and when you check out the chart, there will be Primer opportunities available for credit. Remember, Primer members access webinars and select past programs for free. The chart can be found on Primer's website on the About CIP Recertification page under Acceptable Continuing Education Credits. The chart is continuously updated as new eligible programs become available. It is important to maintain an ongoing record. Keeping records up to date will help tremendously when it comes time to recertify. Continuing education credits can be earned through the active certification period. The certification period is 3 years for CIP. As soon as possible after completing eligible learning opportunities, log them on the Excel Continuing Education Tracker and locate the proper documentation. The Continuing Education Excel Tracker can be found on the About CIP webpage and on the CIP Resources webpage. The Excel Tracker is a record of continuing education opportunities you have completed during the 3-year certification period for CIP. It is different than the Primer Conference Excel session transcript. The conference session transcript is the supporting documentation for the one-line entry on the Continuing Education Excel Tracker. We ask that you use our Excel Tracker to list your continuing education hours. Please complete the CEU Tracker tab on the spreadsheet. Credit hours will automatically populate in the Credit Hours tab. The spreadsheet should be saved and submitted as an Excel document. Watch a short video about how to complete CIP Excel Tracker on the CIP Resources webpage. For learning opportunities with multiple sessions, You can add the learning opportunity on one line with the total number of credits being requested. You do not need to list each individual session as a separate line on the tracker. Be consistent naming entries on the tracker with how they are named on the corresponding documentation. As soon as possible after completing a learning opportunity, enter it on the tracker and locate the appropriate documentation. Keep in mind you may need to retain attendance or even follow-up emails. Take a moment to think about the Continuing Education Excel Tracker. Is the Excel Tracker the same as the Primer Conference session transcript, a list of documentation submitted, or a record of continuing education learning opportunities and requested credits? Knowing and understanding what the Continuing Education Tracker is and how to use it will help you stay organized and track learning opportunities attended or viewed during the active certification period. Answer: a record of continuing education learning opportunities and requested credits. The Excel Tracker is a record of continuing education opportunities completed during the active certification period. The certification period is 3 years for CIP. Add continuing education opportunities on one line with the total number of credits being requested. The tracker is used to ensure recertification requirements are met, and if needed, a marked up copy will be shared back with eligible and ineligible entries. Take a moment to think about conferences and sessions attended. Remember earlier it was mentioned that only conference sessions attended that meet all 3 credit eligibility requirements count toward recertification. Would you think yes or no all sessions should be listed on the Continuing Education Excel Tracker? Knowing and understanding how to log and document conferences and sessions attended will save you time and eliminate duplicate work when tracking learning opportunities attended or viewed during the active certification period. Answer: no. The supporting documentation will provide a list of sessions attended. You can add continuing education opportunities on one line with the total number of credits being requested on the Excel Tracker. For conferences or other events with concurrent sessions, provide a list of sessions attended along with descriptors in the conference or event documentation. If session slides are available, this is helpful for the CIP Council to have during the review process. Thinking about the Continuing Education Excel Tracker and when it is time to submit recertification materials, would you think it is true or false that the tracker will need to be submitted as an Excel document? Answer: true. The Continuing Education Excel Tracker needs to be submitted as an Excel document. The Continuing Education Excel Tracker has embedded formulas that are used to ensure recertification requirements are met. The Continuing Education Excel Tracker is marked up and may be shared back to you if additional information or credits are needed for recertification. Now we will go over documentation. Individuals are responsible for obtaining source documentation for recertification credit and for including such copies of documentation with their materials. The documentation section of the About CIP Recertification webpage outlines the requirements more fully. Documentation for all continuing education credits must be included with recertification materials. If documentation is missing, we will reach out to you and the credits will not be counted until documentation is received. For events that run concurrent sessions, candidates should indicate the sessions they attended in the documentation. As we talked about earlier, the learning opportunity and the total number of credits will be entered as a single line on the Continuing Education Excel Tracker. If you have a certificate of attendance that includes the total number of eligible credits, you only need to submit the certificate of attendance as documentation. If you have a certificate of attendance that does not include the total number of eligible credits, Submit the certificate of attendance along with slides or a detailed agenda from the learning opportunity for conference sessions attended. Suitable documentation for online learning opportunities that do not issue certificates of attendance include copies of sign-in attendance sheets, logs detailing the program title, date of participation, and length of the program that are signed by a supervisor, or emails confirming attendance after the conclusion of the program. Most people submit a log signed by a supervisor. The log can be submitted as a Word document, a separate Excel spreadsheet that is signed by a supervisor, or an email chain with approval from a supervisor that clearly states the session information listed with the second bullet point. Remember, the continuing education Excel tracker is different than documentation, and if you have a supervisor electronically sign the tracker, you will still need to submit the continuing education Excel tracker as a separate Excel file. Take a moment to think about documentation and if it is false or true that you are required to provide documentation for all continuing education activities listed on the Excel tracker. Knowing and understanding documentation requirements will make for a smoother review process. Answer: true. Documentation must be submitted for all entries on the Excel tracker. Individuals are responsible for obtaining source documentation for recertification credit and for including copies of such documentation with their materials. The documentation should include detailed descriptors of learning opportunities listed on the Excel tracker. Proper documentation may eliminate or reduce the need to go back and forth for additional information needed to determine if eligibility requirements are met to give credit. Take a moment to again think about documentation, and is it false or true that for events that run concurrent sessions, the documentation should include sessions attended? Knowing and understanding documentation requirements and what needs to be submitted to support the learning opportunity listed on the Excel tracker will eliminate redundant work and assist the CIP Council when reviewing materials. Answer: true. Learning opportunities should be listed as a single line on the Excel tracker with the total number of credits requested. Documentation should provide individual sessions attended that add up to the total number of credits requested on the continuing education Excel tracker. Documentation should include detailed descriptors for sessions attended. This might be a detailed agenda or slides for each session attended. Please do not just submit a conference agenda without indicating which sessions were attended. As we discussed earlier, sometimes not all conference or event sessions are eligible for recertification credit. We want to share some tips to help make your recertification experience as smooth as possible. Keep your recertification materials together in one place where you will have continuous access to it. It is a good idea to save the materials in a few different places in case one source is no longer available. Retain suitable documentation for online learning opportunities that do not provide certificates of attendance. We have heard people save their documentation on a jump drive as a backup to a folder on their computer. There are two components for a complete submittal: all supporting documentation for continuing education activities and the completed continuing education Excel tracker. We are excited to share we now have an online submittal process. The new online system clearly lays out each requirement and lets you upload everything on one place, making the process easier than ever. The new online submittal process can be found on the About CIP Recertification webpage. You will need to log into your Primer profile when prompted. The first step is, if needed, to download a blank copy of the Continuing Education Excel tracker. If you have already completed the Continuing Education Excel tracker, you can go to the second step to upload the completed tracker and all supporting documentation. A short video, How to Submit Recertification by Continuing Education Materials, is available on the CIP Resources webpage. Complete submittals will move forward to the CIP Council for review and approval determination. Once your materials are approved, you will receive an email with your certification details and letting you know your certification certificate is available for download. Incomplete submittals will be put on hold and you will receive an email letting you know if additional information or credits are needed. The CIP Council makes the final determination if continuing education credits and materials are approved for recertification. CIPs must complete 30 eligible credits over 3 years. Completing more than the minimum required 30 hours will strengthen your materials. Materials can be submitted no earlier than 1 year prior to the certification period end date. Submitting early does not change the next certification period end date. Candidates should submit their recertification by continuing education materials before the due date, so there is enough time to process materials and to ensure you have enough eligible continuing education credits before the deadline. Candidates' credentials are valid during the review process. If your recertification end date is June 30, the deadline to submit is June 1. If your recertification end date is December 31, the deadline to submit is December 1. This chart visually displays the date to recertify by, earliest date materials can be submitted, and submission deadline. There is a 6-month grace period following the recertify by date to allow any loose ends or issues to be resolved. If recertification is not achieved by the end of the 6-month grace period, you will need to take and pass the exam again as an initial candidate. Submitting early does not change the next recertification end date. The last column displays the next due to recertify by date. Whether you submit a year early and are approved or wait till the submission deadline, the next end date will be 3 years out for CIP. Now for some final tips. Review the CIP recertification webpage for acceptable continuing education activities. Completing and documenting more than the CIP minimum 30 hours will strengthen your materials. Regularly log completed learning opportunities on the tracker. As soon as possible after completing learning opportunities, log them on the Continuing Education Excel tracker and locate documentation. Retain suitable documentation for online learning opportunities that do not provide certificates of attendance. Remember that the Continuing Education Excel tracker is different than the Excel conference session transcript. Both will need to be submitted with recertification materials. If you question if a learning opportunity has been given credit, please contact the sponsor and ask if they have had this program reviewed for Primer CIP Continuing Education credit. We are sharing some tips learned along the way and sometimes the hard way. It is not recommended to wait until the last day to submit. Give yourself a cushion to resolve any issues that might come up during the review process. Review can take up to 3 weeks. Incomplete submissions can take longer. This final tip is important. Please update your Primer profile if needed. Do not create a new account as it will not have your certification information. If you cannot remember your password, try a password reset. Let us know if you still cannot access your account. Questions can be submitted to certification@primer.org. Many questions can be answered by reviewing the About CIP Recertification webpage. Detailed information regarding deadlines and fees, recertification options, acceptable continuing education credits can be found on this page. For a quick overview of the recertification process, check out the CIP Recertification Resources page. Here you will find short videos, articles and newsletters, helpful tips for a smoother recertification experience, links, upcoming recertification info sessions, and frequently asked questions. As new tools and resources become available, they are added to these pages. This brings us to the end of the presentation. Again, you can visit our website and view the CIP recertification webpage. Of course, if you have any questions that came up during the review process or need clarification on something, you can email certification@primer.org. Thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. I look forward to hearing from you and working with you as you go through the recertification process.